Hello and welcome back for Lecturette number 4, the octatonic scale. This is a topic that I love to talk about and think about, and it's a musical scale that is very rich and offers us a lot of possibilities. And I'm going to jump right into it because I don't want this to be an absolutely epic video, although it may be longer than the others. So the last scale we talked about was the whole tone scale, which was a succession of whole steps. We have not yet talked about the chromatic scale, which is, of course, a succession of half steps. And we're not going to talk about that for the moment. The octatonic scale, which is also known in some quarters as the diminished scale, is simply an alternation of whole steps and half steps. So I'm going to jump right into this first measure here, and we are going to play. Let's jump to the next measure and get one last note. Now I'm using finale at the moment, and I have it set right now so that it defaults to flats, and we will talk about spelling in a moment, but we know that the spelling doesn't really matter as far as the integer labeling of these notes go. C is always 0, D flat is always 1, E flat is always 3, E is 4, G flat is 6, G is 7, A is 9, B flat is T, and C is 0. And I will tell you, it will do you a world of good to learn and memorize these correspondences because they always stay the same, and it's going to help us. Now, here's my scale, and a couple of things to notice. First of all, like the whole tone scale, because this is an 8-note scale and our notation system has only 7 letter names, again, this is a scale that's going to somewhere along the line involve an awkward respelling of a note. So if we think of major and minor scales, the diatonic scales, we always have the right number of notes to correspond to the system. There's never more than one kind of C or one kind of D, and by that I mean D sharp or D natural or D flat in any major or minor scale. But when it comes to the octatonic scale, we're always going to have to respell one note. When I present it as a scale, I usually like to just arrange it so that I'm only respelling one note. In this case, I think it might work best if I simply switch this very first note to C sharp, switch this one to D sharp, leave this as E, the G flat I'll make F sharp. Suddenly that becomes a very readable scale, and I might decide to put in a precautionary kind of accidental there. Come on, finale, update. I don't know why it's not fixing the layout there, but let's drag that over a little bit. I might put that natural in. So the thing to keep in mind is that the diminished scale is, the spelling is a matter of convenience and musicality. We often think that it feels very natural for a natural note when it's ascending to move to a sharp note. So this C to C sharp looks good, and once I've made that change, all the other notes can work with each having its own letter name. And all the steps look very clearly like what they are, right? I see half steps and whole steps pretty clearly here. Now, I want to give this scale a label, and unlike the whole tone scale, where we could just use the first integer of the scale, in this case 0, I'm not going to be able to do that here, and you'll see in a moment why not. But for right now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to label this, and I'm going to call it octatonic. Let's just say oct, and I'm going to say O1. And like the other scales, I will tell you that I can reorder this scale, and you'll notice that, for instance, I could, let's copy just these notes, right? I'm going to copy these, and I'll move them over here. Right, so now I've got a scale that starts 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, T. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow these notes. I'm going to put them here, but I'm going to transpose them up the octave. Right, so you'll notice what I've done is just reordered the scale. This is 0, 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, T. And here now I've got 3, 4, right, starting there. 6, 7, 9, T, 0, 1, which you see here, 6, 7, 9, T, 0, 1, if I slipped around. And I'll show you something cool. This is a bit of a magic trick. If I want to get this scale to be this scale, all I need to do, I don't even need to reorder it. I can just transpose it chromatically down and what's the interval? I'm going from D sharp to C. So I'm going to go, I'm going to transpose it down a minor third, and I think maybe an augmented second is the way to do it for the spelling here. And what do you know? I'm back, or maybe it wasn't the way. I'm back to the original spelling. My numbers are now wrong. But if I go in and we say 0, 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, T. And this is true even though this spelling is pretty horrific, right? And we would want to go in and, you know, maybe this time I'll spell it like this. C, D flat, E flat, F flat, G flat. And if I go to G natural here, and then go to A here, again, I've got another spelling where I'm only respelling one note. The first version sounds like this. And the second version sounds like this. In other words, exactly the same. Now, in that other version where I started on 3, I would not call that scale octatonic 3/4. I'm going to call any octatonic scale that has this exact content octatonic 0/1. Is that the only octatonic scale there is? No, that is not, right? And if you think about it, this is 8 of the 12 chromatic notes, so there are 4 notes missing from this scale. So now I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to start this time on the note C sharp. And I'm going to continue. Let's make it C sharp. And I'm going to continue alternating. We'll start with a half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, maybe A flat, half step, whole step, and half step here now to B natural, and then a whole step would get me to my next note there. Okay, so let's put in these integers, right? This is just going to be 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, T, E, 1. And again, my spelling is a matter of convenience. In this case, I'm not sure I love, again, it's kind of awkward to have a flat note go to a natural note when it's ascending. So what I think I'll do here is I'll go from G to G sharp, and then to A sharp, and then to B, and then to C sharp. And that, again, looks pretty good to me. Remember, you're always going to have to spell one of the 8 notes 2 different ways. In other words, there's going to be one letter name at least that is reused. And if you're writing it as a scale, I suggest trying to leave that to 1. Okay, so I'm going to call this octatonic O. Let's see, wrong tool. I'm going to call this octatonic 1, 1, 2. And a way to remember this is language I used last time. Octatonic 0/1, we could say equals the octatonic scale that contains the pitch classes 0 and 1. And you'll note that I did not say begins with 0 and 1. That is not important. It's just that it contains it. Here I'll say this is the octatonic scale that contains the pitch classes 1 and 2. And you will note that every other note in this scale exists in the scale. So there is no C, but there is a C sharp. There is no D sharp or E flat, but there is an E. Right, there it is. And we could do this by number, right? There's no 6, but there is a 7. There's no 9, but there is a T. And it turns out that any two different octatonic scales will have 4 notes in common. I want to go on and just show you the next and final octatonic scale. And on this one, I'm going to start on D, starting with a half step, right? So I'm going to go, there's my D. This time we'll go half step to E flat, whole step to F, half step, let's try F sharp. We'll make that G sharp, whole step, half step to A, whole step to B, half step to C, and if I wanted to continue to repeat the first note, I'll go to D. And I'm going to go over here and just type in some integer numbers. These are always the same, 2, right? They're always, D is always 2, E flat is always 3, F is always 5, F sharp is always 6, and G sharp is always 8, A is always 9, B is always E, C is always 0, and D is always 2. And you can see, if you look at the integers, it is pretty easy to see the pattern. 1, 2, skip 3, 4, 5, skip 6, 7, 8, skip 9, T, E. It's easy to kind of get your head around that here. 2, 3, skip 4, 5, 6, skip 7, 8, 9, skip 10, E, O, skip 1 and 2. And this is going to be octatonic 2, 3. You'll also sometimes see this as octatonic O2, but I'm going to call it octatonic 2, 3. And that coincides with what our textbook says. And I can steal this and just create a thing here that just says the octatonic scale that contains the pitch classes 2 and 3. And what you will discover, you may be sitting there in the comfort of your home saying, hey, why did he say there are only 3? Well, if I were to go to the next scale, right, we built one starting on C. This is that same one, remember. We built another one, octatonic 1, 2, starting on C sharp. And we get this over there. And then we built a third one starting on D. So we're going up by half step. So it is true that I could build another scale starting on E flat, and let's, for the sake of the spelling, let's do D sharp, right? Because I know I'm starting with a half step. D sharp, half step to E, whole step to F sharp, half step to G, whole step to A, half step to B flat, whole step to C, and then half step to C sharp. And you might say, okay, isn't that octatonic 3, 4, right? Starts with pitches 3, 4. But the truth of the matter is, when I type in these integers and we see what they are, right? This is 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, T, O, 1. What do you notice? What you notice is that this is exactly the same scale as this one, right? 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, T, O, 1. Look here, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, T, O, 1, if we curve around. And it just so happens that the octatonic scale essentially repeats after 3 transpositions, right? So any transposition of an octatonic scale by any multiple of 3 semitones is going to simply duplicate the same scale. And I will prove that here by, let's get rid of these labels. I'm using the lyric tool, so we have some odd word extensions, but we'll ignore it for the moment. And you'll note that if I take this and transpose it up let's do a minor third. Transpose up a minor third. The numbers that I get here are 6, 7, 9, T, 0, 1, 3, 4. And look, 6, 7, 9, T, just start here, 6, 7, 9, T. And the reason is, and I can blow this up a little bit, the reason is that when I transpose by a multiple of 3, D sharp becomes F sharp. E becomes G, right? F sharp becomes A. The technical term is D sharp is mapped on to F sharp at T3. So this is just part of the symmetrical nature of this scale. I want to clean this busy stuff up a little bit now. And what I want to do is just demonstrate one other thing, which is that if I take every other note, and now let's go up to that first scale. I'm going to get rid of this note, and I'm going to just take every other note in this scale, but build it as a chord, right? So I'm going to say C, right? And then I'm going to take D sharp. Let's do it exactly as it's spelled there. D sharp. I'm going to skip E, take F sharp. I'm going to take A. And what do you notice here? What I have, let's move it over. What I have is a fully diminished seventh chord. In this case, with this spelling, D sharp, F sharp, A, C. And if it's easier for you to see, I can just take this C and move it like that. I have a fully diminished seventh chord. And that is also going to be true when I take the other notes, right? So if I start with C sharp, which is right there, and I skip D sharp, I do E, skip F sharp and do G, and skip A and do B flat, we see there that I've got two fully diminished seventh chords, one starting on D sharp, one starting on C sharp, and it turns out that all of the octatonic scales work this way, and to make matters more interesting, there is only one remaining fully diminished seventh chord, right? So I've got the one here that's got let's see, we've got D sharp, F sharp, A, C. I've got C sharp. What if I start, it can't be C natural. What if I start on D? Let's do a diminished seventh chord, D, F. Let's say A flat, C flat. Right? And the combination here, these are all 12 pitch classes, right? And the combination of any two of these fully diminished seventh chords will give me one of the three octatonic scales, right? So if I combine these two, right, which has pitch class 1 and 3, this is octatonic 01, right? You can see 1, 3, 4, 6, 7. If I combine these two, this has 1 and 2. I want to look over at octatonic 1, 2, right? These second two chords are octatonic 1, 2 when combined. C sharp, D, I can just alternate. E, F, G, A flat, B flat, C flat. And lastly, if I combine the first with the last, you would guess that I would probably get octatonic 2, 3, D, D sharp is the beginning, right? D, D sharp. Here's D, E flat, and then F to F sharp, F, F sharp. There it is, right? So any two fully diminished seventh chords, if you just kind of interlock them together, they're going to give you one of these octatonic scales. I think I'm going to leave this here. I think there's probably going to be an octatonic scale part 2 because there's a lot to cover. The final thing I want to say is I just want to remind you that these are the 3 octatonic scales. Octatonic scales do not need to start on a half step. This scale, if I delete this note, going back here, and put the C at the end, oops, let's get it there, right? This is still octatonic 01, right? It is not octatonic 1-3. We're not labeling, it's the content and not actually the order. So octatonic 01 is any ordering of the octatonic scale that contains these 8 pitch classes. All right, I'm going to let that sink in. I really, really hope you enjoyed the octatonic scale. I think I will have a part 2 of the octatonic scale. I don't know if it'll be the next one, but I'll leave you in a little bit of suspense. But this is enough to just get you started a little bit thinking about the scale. So enjoy.